Welcome everybody to the IPA Europe webinar, Can a Mutual Solution be Found for Probiotics in Europe? Legal Analysis, Dilemmas, Solutions. My name is Rosanna Pecere and I am Executive Director of the International Probiotic Association Europe. It is a real pleasure for me to see the high number of participants that are connecting today from all over the world. It seems pretty evident that this topic is of high interest to many stakeholders. I'm here with Karen Wokes, Chairwoman of the IPA Europe Regulatory Committee. She will be our moderator for today and will run the Q&A session. Before I give the floor to Karen, some housekeeping. We have already received many questions from you at the moment of registration. We have selected a number of them, but you are welcome to ask more using the chat and the Q&A option. During the session, we will try to answer to most of them, but if this is not possible due to time constraint, we will follow up later, or maybe we will have sufficient material for a new webinar. I will now give the floor to Karen, who will introduce our speakers.
Thank you, Rosanna. I'm Karen Wokes. I'm the IPA Europe Regulatory Chair at the moment. I echo Rosanna's words of welcome, and I agree that the number of participants certainly highlights just how important this is and the interest in finding a way forward for probiotics. We've got two speakers this afternoon. First, our IPA Europe President, Espen Lauland, who's currently responsible for the external collaborations and R&D at Chris Hansen. Espen has worked in both commercial and scientific positions involving probiotics and other ingredients for the food, agri and pharma industries, including 10 years as head of R&D at Chris Hansen. Esben will set the scene for us on the current situation and the role that probiotics, food and food supplements and industry can play in contributing to the EU's farm to fork strategy and to better functioning of the European internal market. Our second speaker is Katja Merton-Lenz. Katja is an elected member to the Council of the Order of the Paris Bar, the founder of the law firm Food Law Science and Partners, where she works as a leading practitioner in European food and feed law, assisting clients on a wide range of subjects ranging from regulatory authorizations to marketing and innovation. Katja will take us through a legal analysis to explore not only the current dilemma, but the opportunities to reach legal certainty with a mutual solution such that the consumer is better informed and the European industry is able to be innovative and competitive. I give the floor first to Esben.
Thank you very much, Karen, and thank you very much for the introduction. And what I would like to do is, of course, to put a little today's, you could say, topic into a little broader context, in the sense that I think actually that what we are aiming at today is also something to do with the overall farm to fork strategy that the EU Commission and the EU system has initiated. So I'd like to try to link those two elements together. So if I could take the next slide. That is just also for everybody to be aware of that the probiotic market, both worldwide and also in Europe, are of a considerable size. And that, of course, what we are aiming at is, of course, to be able to inform probably about the probiotics, in particular, in this case, in the European market. So if you take the next slide, just a little about the IPA Europe, our history and mission, that we, of course, want to be seen as the European voice of the probiotic industry. And we are, you could say, the European charter of the International Probiotic Association, which have more than 100 members in 29 countries. But IPA Europe the members here are some of the, you could say, major players in the probiotic market, with BioGaia, Christian Hansen, IFF, L'Allemand, Les Affres, Probi, and Yakult as members. And of course, what we are aiming at is to be, the voice in Europe, and of course, representing the industries, you could say, voices in Europe. If we move to the next slide, it's also just to set the scene is that I mean, we have been, I think, very fortunate that the European Commission has launched this farm to fork strategy, because I think it definitely talks into the center of what you could say the probiotic industry is looking for. And I've just highlighted, you could say, here the most important thing in the farm to fork strategy about making relevant information available to the consumer, motivating consumers in making decisions on good and healthy diet in a sustainable perspective, and using a more flexible approach to regulatory and non-regulatory to promote best practice, and making use of research and innovation. And I think those four elements really talks into the you could say raison d'etre of the IPA Europe. So if you take the next slide, so we think that it should be a sustainable approach, should be holistic, and I think the European probiotic industry can contribute to the objectives of the farm to fork strategy with creating a more clear definition about what are the probiotic category, continuing to offer high quality products, meeting also consumer expectations to make informed choices, and fostering a regulatory environment that provides consistency and promotes innovation for the probiotic industry. So if we take the next slide and go a little deeper into, you could say that innovation and so on is, and I'm talking out of an R&D experience, as you heard in my introduction in the beginning, that I mean, there's a lot of things going on from a scientific point of view within the probiotic field, and it's just been amazing how many new, you could say, articles and studies which have proven that probiotics have an effect. And I'm just highlighting a few here with my new gut project and so on. But there's a lot of course, other important scientific you could say studies within this field. So there is a growing scientific evidence of probiotics. So if you go on the next slide, and that is actually also something that we see that the consumers are also seeing. And IPA Europe have just recently done a study carried out by 3GM Research and Insights on how you could say 8,000 consumers in 8 European countries viewed probiotics. And if you look on the Q5, and I've just taken a few, you could say, indications out of this survey in this presentation, but basically you will see that the 63% of the asked participant in this survey actually consume probiotics and food supplements. So it is something which is, you could say, already known by consumers, and they are asking for it. And that also links into the next question, the question number 11, if you are actually informed about it. And there you can see that people do not really feel or find that, or there's a larger percentage of those being asked who you could say respond that they don't feel that they get enough information about, you could say, what are the benefits of probiotics and so on. But in any case, what this just proves is that consumers, large majority of consumers know what probiotics are, but they feel that they don't get, you would say, the information that they want to have. So the probiotics, the genie is out of the bottle. So if you go to the next slide. So what we would very much like to see is, of course, a better regulation for better consumer protection, because if people don't feel that they can get, you could say, the right information about the products, then we are not giving, you could say, the good consumer protection. And we find, and I think also Katja will come much more into that in the next presentation, about that the current position of the European Commission, based on the European Commission guidelines or guidance of 2007, where it states that that probiotics is a health claim, that this guidance is obsolete and does not reflect the reality of the scientific innovation and the societal changes here. So we need to see a different approach in this context here. Yes, if we go to the next slide. And in the whole thing about, you could say, probiotics and so on, so IPA Europe, together with IPA International, have been very proactive in this field, and have set up, you could say, some criteria for the use of the term probiotics, where we have listed, you could say, 4 things that has to be part of, if you want to claim a probiotic, a probiotic strain. So it has, of course, to be characterized properly. It has to be safe for the intended use. It has also to have at least one peer-reviewed clinical documented study or human study, and of course it also has to be, you know, viable in the product at the time of when it's consumed. So I think, I mean, from IPA we have definitely also set the bar in the right level. So if we move on to the next slide. So fortunately, we have seen during the last actually year a growing tendency among the European member states that the old, you could say, regulatory state as of the guidance of 2007 have been challenged, and that there are several member states who have opened up for a more proactive, you could say, approach vis-a-vis the use of the word probiotics. And that has definitely been a positive development, which we also from IPA Europe have supported very much. And you will see the green areas in the European slide here, that those member countries which have opened up for the use of the denomination probiotics. So if we move to the next slide, then you could say there are different, you could say, levels of how far you would say the regulatory regime have evolved in the different countries. And just to say that the green bar, the one to the left, is you know, the green countries that were highlighted on the previous slide. But there are also some countries which have moved in the direction, but not as far as proven in the blue column, and then the rest is still having, you could say, a more restrictive approach. But I think I won't go into details on this one, because I think also Katja will go much more into details about this one. So if we go to the next slide, I think we can see that we are going for a more holistic approach for probiotics in Europe. There's an interest in the consumption of probiotics in food and beverage and dietary supplement. So we feel that both the consumer and the industry, I mean, we are looking for a frame where we can, you could say, inform about these things, about the benefits and so on. So we need a more consistent approach in the EU, providing useful guidance for stakeholders and consumers. And then, of course, we are also looking for, you know, a harmonization of the condition used for the term probiotics in the different member states. We can see, you know, a positive development in certain, but we would of course like to see that going for for the whole of the European Union markets. So if we go to the next slide, you could say that our key messages in this context on the European framework for probiotics is that we want to implement precise criteria and conditions to frame the term probiotics. We wanted a guided approach where you could say, depending on the characteristics of the product and appropriate rules applying within the EU regulatory framework, a clear labeling environment for probiotics across Europe, and a harmonization and holistic approach, which is in line with the European farm to fork strategy objectives. And if we go to the final slide I will present here. Yeah, it was just to announce that we have also joined forces with other organizations, especially this European Dairy Association, in order to, you could say, give more strength about our request for a change in the European regulatory framework for probiotics. With this, I thank you very much for your attention, and we will move on to Katja, or if there are questions. Karen, you're the one taking over.
Thanks very much, Esben. Thanks very much for setting the scene, and we'll move along to Katja now. Thank you.
Katja, we would need you to turn on your microphone.
Yep. So good afternoon, everybody, or good morning, or I don't know, all around the world. It's a pleasure to hear that we have such a large audience, but my only regret is not to meet and to be interactive with this audience like the last time in Roma. It was so nice. So please, Rosanna, again another time in your marvelous country. More seriously, thanks, Esben. You have almost covered, I mean, everything, and it was a very good, much more than an introduction to my point today. Very humbly, I would like to present and to exchange after that with you regarding pure legal aspects, and more concretely how we can work together in order to get a concrete, real, strong status legally recognized for probiotics. There is not only one way, it could be 2 or 3 different ways, not with the same consequences. So within the short slot today, I will try to explain that to you. I'll just stop my video and I'm all yours. So Esben has already mentioned that to you, but just to recap, we have an issue. This issue is a 2007 EC non-binding guidance, but this non-binding guidance is hampering literally the European probiotic market. Just again, as a reminder, EFSA so far has only approved one health claim, and although EFSA did not close the door to a possible demonstration of health effects of probiotics over the past 15 years. There were, except one positive decision, only negative opinions from EFSA. So this means clearly that for you food business operators to write contains probiotics on a packaging, you have to get an approval from the European authorities. Next slide, please. But even always concretely speaking, it is a fact that there are, however, a very huge interest and a very high demand from consumers for probiotics. And consequently, these products are sold on the market with or without bearing the claim contains probiotics. And in addition, despite the theoretical Europe's firm stand against it, many member states have officially authorized to mention probiotics to different extents, as Ben mentioned that. So this situation cannot stand too long. Harmonized and coherent system would help improve the situation, and it's really required because we are within a European Union, meaning an harmonized market. And I saw one question regarding the possible hurdle and obstacle to the free movement of goods. Yes, definitely. It will be, and it already is, an obstacle to the free movement of goods, the fact that we've already had different legal system, different ways of interpreting and accepting or not the claim probiotics on the packaging. So in light of these challenges, I have assessed, asked by IPA, and this is the purpose of this presentation today, different scenarios that could create a unique and favorable legal environment for the use of the term probiotic on labeling at a European level. Next slide, please. I have identified 3 legal avenues. Next slide, please. First of all, I mean, the most obvious regarding the context is considering to repeal or to review the European Commission guidance to prevent the term probiotic from being automatically categorized as a health claim. Next slide. Again, in 2007, the European Commission published a guidance on the implementation of the regulation 1924/2006, which state that the wording contains probiotics or prebiotics is a health claim, as it does not merely provide factual information, but asserts that the reference to probiotics and prebiotics imply a health benefit. This only sentence has huge consequences, as you know. Actually, as of today, over 400 health claims have been submitted to EFSA, and only one was authorized in 2010, portion based on Article 13.1 for lactose digestion for yogurt. This is the only one. But this guidance constitutes the only reference to probiotics, and as such creates a strong legal uncertainty for food business operators. Next slide, please. So it's my first option, because one simple option to get rid of this guidance would to be removed it. Technically, the European Commission can on its own initiative review or repeal any kind of guidance if the Commission realizes that this guidance is no longer fit for purposes. And it's not only, an hypothetical or an hypothesis out of the blue. There was one pretty recent precedent. We believe that it is we make it, concrete and reasonable to believe that this is extremely unlikely, but feasible. Indeed, the last time the European Commission was officially asked about probiotics, its answer was that the term probiotics is to be considered as implying a health benefit, and indications such as contains probiotics should therefore be regarded as health claim when considering new application. The Commission does not have the intention to take action on this specific matter. So far today, the European Commission officially does not seem to be ready to remove its guidance spontaneously. It doesn't mean that technically the European Commission cannot remove it. Talking about and referring to this precedent, maybe some of you know or have heard about it. It was about the coloring foodstuff guidance, and the European Commission removed it spontaneously or had to remove it because of a ruling from the European Court of Justice. There was a sort of conflict of interpretation, and the European Commission decided to remove. But the official version that was that this guidance has to be reviewed, but it was in 2018, if I remember well, and since 2018, this guidance purely disappeared from the official website and doesn't exist anymore. So it means that, again, technically speaking, the European Commission has all the margin to review or repeal or remove any guidance. Next slide, please. In other words, how to achieve it? Because based on this option, it could be a good option, if not the best, one of the best, the most efficient, and the Commission is totally capable to do it. We need to find just how to force the European Commission to decide to remove. In our case, it seems to me that only a political pressure could force the European Commission to act, and this political pressure could only come from the European Council. Actually, national pressure from many member states already started more than a decade ago at a technical level. But so far, these national pressures failed to convince the European Commission to revise spontaneously its guidelines. So I may insist on this point. We need to change the approach. We need to change the level of action, and this time to use the Council to put a huge political pressure on the European Commission to achieve, if possible, this first option. And if this first option meets, your agreement, and if you all consider that it's a good option. Next slide, please. The second option is again regarding Regulation 1924/2006, and it's annexed, but it is a different approach. This option will consist of including contains probiotics in the list of nutrition claims. Next slide, please. Just as a reminder, according to the regulation, Health, Nutrition and Health Claim, a nutrition claim is defined as any claim which states, suggests, or implies that a food has particular beneficial nutritional properties due to the nutrient or other substances it contains in reduced or increased proportions, or does not contain. So what do you think if we could redefine the legal status of probiotics as other substances? Then I think it would be a huge chance that we could add contains probiotics to the list of nutrition claims. Next slide, please. And this option does not come just from my mind and my creativity and imagination to argue that probiotics should fall under the remit of other substances. We could use the European Commission and Council's preparatory work. Very interesting indeed to note that both the Commission's initial proposal and the Council had suggested including probiotic bacteria in the list of nutrients. It was during the preliminary work and preparatory work in 2003, so 3 years before the adoption of the Nutrition and Health Claim Regulation. For a reason I ignore, unfortunately for us, this preliminary work was abandoned, but it could be used again as a good basis, as an open door, as a point of entry for arguing that probiotics should fall under the remit of other substances. Next slide, please. It implies that some criteria and conditions will have to be set. So guys, you will have some work. I just propose and suggest and up to you to put everything into practical and concrete solution. In practical terms, this would require to set criteria and conditions to identify probiotics microorganisms and label them correctly. Probiotics, in other terms, must have a defined content and an appropriate viable count at end of shelf life. They should also be documented with suitable clinical evidence and safe for their intended use. But if all these requirements are agreed at European level, for sure, they will provide clarity to the minimum criteria needed for the proper use of the term probiotics in both food and food supplement categories. Next slide, please. Again, the question, how to achieve it? Amending this nutrition claim list requires to adopt through comitology an implementing act to modify the annex. Usually this procedure takes about 1 year. 1 year is not too long to achieve the results. This is a rare procedure, but it already happened twice, in 2010 to add omega-3 fatty acids, and in 2012 to add no added sodium salt. So it's not only a pure hypothesis, it's really concrete, and it is, how can I say, it is the regulation itself has imagined this possibility. So this annex is not definite. You can amend, you can complete, you can enlarge this annex, and we can really work on this option. But again and again, and I will repeat myself for the second time, yes, we could wait for a spontaneous review by the European Commission in the continuity of the refit revisions. But if nothing comes from the European Commission, why not requesting a clear political request by member state and again, the Council? Next slide, please. Last option, pretty different. This time, my idea is to use the regulation, the famous FIC regulation, the regulation 1169/2011, and using this regulation to probiotics. I will explain my point. Next slide, please. The FIC regulation establishes all the general principles and requirements and responsibilities governing food information. And this regulation lays down the means to guarantee the right of consumers to information. What is of high interest today is that all these general principles of food labeling are mandatory particulars. And the purpose of these mandatory particulars is that clear information has to be communicated to consumers to help them make appropriate food choices, including, and I insist, the name of the food and the list of ingredients. By contrast, the 2007 guidance, which creates such a concern and an issue for the probiotics industry, regards only voluntary information. Next slide, please. So my idea is very simple. Why can't we consider probiotics as ingredients? So far, only the strains of the probiotics can be included in the list of ingredients. Consequently, in most cases, if we talk about the need of a clear information to the consumer, I'm really sorry, but definitely an average consumer would probably not understand that the name of the strain in the ingredient list is, in fact, a probiotic. This is obviously the reason why, to remedy this, some member states, such as Netherlands, Denmark, are using a national approach referring to Article 6.3 of the Food Supplement Directive, stating that the term probiotic can be used on the label of the products as a mandatory category term for food supplements. But without referring to food supplements to be larger and to be able to include food and food supplements, why can't we refer to the FIC regulation and consider that probiotics should simply be legally characterized as simple ingredients to be recognized and allowed as the descriptive name of the product. And the descriptive name of the product is a mandatory information for consumers under the FIC regulation. Next slide, please. Again, how to achieve it concretely. Applying the regulation, the FIC regulation to probiotics is, easier and more difficult. Easier because it could be achieved through a more flexible approach, meaning that it only requires that the authorities accept this interpretation of the regulation. This interpretation of the regulation over the 2007 guidance. In other terms, we need to find a way to clarify the situation and force the European institution and consequently the National Authority of Control to accept that an interpretation of a general regulation about food information to consumer prevails on a guidance regarding claim, meaning voluntary information. Even more concretely, how to achieve this? This legal recognition could come from the Council or the European Commission, for example, through an official statement initiated by a parliamentary question. I really like this way of acting because it could put the Commission in a corner, or that it's more delicate to get within a short period of time, is to get a ruling from the European Court of Justice through a request for a preliminary ruling. But it means that we have a challenge and hearings and a national case, and this national case will be after that handled by the European Court of Justice. So it means 2 to 3 years at least, and we need to find the opportunity to have a national challenge before a national court. So it's not difficult to handle, but we need to find an occasion, an opportunity. For the parliamentary question, it could be easier to organize and to get an answer. Next slide, please. So my conclusion is to address the probiotics labeling issue. As I mentioned in my introduction, there is not only one solution. I would more suggest a twofold approach as followed. First of all, the very specific claims should remain within the scope of the Nutrition and Health Claim Regulation. And so the submission of a dossier to EFSA for health claim authorization should be limited to strains that have very specific characteristics and therefore specific effects on health. But at the same time, more generally speaking, probiotics should be recognized as mandatory information, as I mentioned, as a descriptive name of the food, and as such communicated to consumers under the FIC regulation, but as well as voluntary information, but under a recognized nutrition claim. And this time under the regulation 1924-2006. So we cover everything or almost everything. And this approach, in my opinion, is efficient, pretty subtle sometimes, but requires definitely a very strong political push to force the European Commission to come, out of the wood and to have the courage to decide to remove the guidance or to change its interpretation. So let's find a way and push all together and force the European Commission to change this situation. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Katja, for the explanation, but more importantly, not only the situation as it is now, but some more important possible ways going forward. I'm now going to move to some questions to the panel. Just one about if the recording is going to be available. Yes, it will. It will be on the YouTube channel of IPA Europe. So a question for Katja, first of all. We've had in the questions that were gathered beforehand, a number of questions and comments that suggest that a possible view that there is no legal challenge to the term of probiotic, and that it's possibly just a misinterpretation depending on the member state's interpretation. And other comments where there's some confusion about, well, is a probiotic a descriptor versus is it a health claim? And I know that you looked at the legal background and the way forward very well in your presentation. Thank you. But do you have any further advice on how probiotics are positioned and how the approach in Europe compares with other geographies that allow for the use of the term? And there was also another question that popped through on the Netherlands and Denmark, where you have the situation where it's clear where it's used as a description for food supplements, but not for foods. And then that creates the uncertainty, well, if I'm going to use it on food, is it then illegal?
Yeah, I thought I have already answered in my presentation, but just to recap, for me, definitely there is a legal issue regarding probiotics because of this guidance. This guidance, since this guidance has been adopted, we have to read and to interpret and to understand the regulation based on the explanation provided by the European Commission in its guidance. So it means, and this is the path followed by, and the interpretation followed by EFSA, this means that as long as we have this guidance officially on the website of the European Commission, we cannot put any contains probiotics or any probiotic denomination because it is per se a health claim. It is a reason why, I started my reasoning first step by what can I do to get rid of this guidance? Because nothing in the regulation itself is in favor or against probiotics. And without this guidance, there is no there would not have been any legal issue. But since we have this guidance, yes, we have a legal issue. It's not just a misinterpretation, or it's a misinterpretation of the European Commission, but it has legal consequences. And these legal consequences has other legal consequences. There was another question regarding the obstacle on the market. Yes, definitely, it creates obstacles for the free movement of goods, because as soon as you have different interpretation with some member states which accept contains probiotics just for food supplement or for all foods, and others do not accept, how can you find your way? So depending where you produce your food supplement with probiotics, you will have a prejudice, because you will be allowed or not to place on your own market your product with a claim, and on other market you will not be allowed. You will have to respect a sort of fragmented market, which is not the spirit of the union market. So this situation cannot stand too long.
Hence the importance of the European-wide solution. Thank you.
Yes.
And another question, Katja, relates to timing, and if there's any indication of how long it would take for a regulatory change to be made that would clearly allow for probiotics. I saw in your presentation there was a reference maybe to a year for some of the.
It depends. It depends on the option. Yeah, everything takes time. You can imagine. It's easy to say. I'm staying here and say, oh, I'm sitting on my chair and say, yeah, just only to force and to push the Commission. Very strong political pressure. So the minimum to be reasonable, it will be 1 year, I think. But I try to find realistic options. So the realistic options, removing the guidance, the Commission can decide that tomorrow. So all of us, we need to find a way to force the door of the Council and up to the Council and the Member States to put a pressure on the European Commission. So I would say 6 months, 1 year, it depends how active and how proactive and how convincing we could be. First option. The second one, the same, 1 year, maybe 2 years, because the second option, I'm not so comfortable, because it's a little out of my scope, because part of this option depends on your effort in terms of technical and scientific criteria and data. So I cannot lobby, I cannot act on your behalf as long as I do not have a very strong dossier in order to feed the European Commission and saying, yes, it's definitely an other substance, and yes, there is a need to add this other substance to the nutritional claims annex. So there is still a gap for me to appreciate how long it will take to build the dossier. Maybe you've already had all the information. I don't know. So if you want, or if you all decide to move forward on this option, we need to work all together and to prepare the dossier. And the last option, difficult to say, it could be same, maybe 6 months, because to prepare a parliamentary question, it's not difficult. We have to convince a member of the European Parliament and to find a hole in the agenda, so a slot. It's not difficult, and the Commission is bound. It has to answer within a short period of time. So, no, I really try to find, again, realistic options, feasible one, efficient one.
Thanks very much. We also saw some support coming in for work on prebiotics, where, like you say, there were similar challenges. So our mission as IPA is based on the term probiotic, but obviously we recognize there's interest to work on prebiotic and can join other stakeholders to discuss. Also some questions coming in around other new terms that we see, terms like postbiotics and parabiotics. So I would say that for us, certainly as IPA, the first thing we need to work on is creating a framework for probiotics. We're live organisms are concerned. And these new terms are not in scope, obviously, of this particular webinar, but certainly something to be followed and to watch.
Yes.
And similarly, these LBPs, who had a question on, do you think that the probable arrival on the market of new live biotherapeutic products can help or hinder the future of probiotics in Europe? I would say that LBPs and probiotics sit in two very different spaces, and they have very different intended uses. And always we should take care when we're talking about foods not to assign any medicinal kind of intentions to it, and any health claims on probiotics for use in foods would clearly not be for treatment of disease. I don't know, Katja, if you have anything to add about LBPs.
Yeah, I do agree, but no, I don't have really something added value on this point.
Okay. And we also received questions on the ongoing advocacy efforts to support a good understanding of the term probiotic and harmonization of the use of the term, as we've been discussing across Europe and across food categories, including in this recent position with EDA. And Esben, I don't know if you mind commenting on the IPA Europe position again, just so that it's clear.
Yeah, I can do so, and thank you very much for also the presentation you gave, Katja, and also the comments so far. Of course, I mean, what we would of course like is, as I mentioned in my presentation, to implement the precise criteria and conditions to frame the you could say the term probiotics, and that we have a clear labeling environment for probiotics across Europe, and also a harmonized and holistic approach which is in line, you could say, with the EU farm to fork strategy objectives and so on. And I think in this context, and I think that's also maybe what you are referring to, Karen, is that I mean, we have, and which were also shown in the short video that was at the end of my presentation, that we have worked together with other organizations, and in this particular with the European Dairy Association, EDA, on you could say getting a more momentum from industry in order to, you could say, you know, put some pressure on the EU Commission, but also on, you could say, on member states about, you would say, the lack of logic, as if I may use Katja's word about, you know, how the whole regulatory framework is set up, and that we, I mean, need to, you know, get this upgrade so it reflects what is actually the conditions today. As I was also alluding to in my presentation, I mean, we have, you know, the consumers, the European consumers, who are already, you know, using probiotics and consuming probiotics, but they are not, you know, in a position to really, you know, get the right information about probiotics and so on. And I think we need to do that, and I think that was also, you know, mentioned by Katja in, you know, a possible solution, you know, to overcome the current obstacles that we see.
Thanks, Esben. Another one that's just come through is about the option 1, Katja. If removing the EC guidance would still not leave the interpretation open to the member states anyway.
Sorry, doesn't work. Yes, I'm back. Yeah, we're moving the by removing the European guidance, we will find the solution. I mean, because EFSA will not be bound anymore by the guidance, by the fact that it's definitely a probiotic. So it's I mean, yes, the member states can have, and we will still have a margin for national interpretation, but there will be no need for national interpretation. We will be back to my conclusion, meaning that it's a twofold approach. By removing the guidance, we will face another situation. First option for very specific probiotics with very specific characteristics, still up to the food business operators to submit a health dossier, a health claim dossier, and more generally speaking, for just contains probiotics, we will be back to, or we can refer to the FIC regulation and consider it just a denomination. So for me, removing the guidance is the best solution.
Thank you. And something related is looking at probiotic as a nutrient. There's some questions on, well, can it actually be defined as a nutrient, because the US doesn't recognize it as a nutrient, but we were saying under other substances, not under nutrients, right?
Right. Yeah, I consider as well this point, and I'm still wondering whether we could consider probiotic as a nutrient, but just to make sure that we will not be challenged of the fact that yes or no, it is or it is not a nutrient. It's easy because we have at our disposal this option to consider other substance. So let's go to other substance. But yes, it could be as well, my understanding, but I'm not a scientist, that probiotic could be included in the category of nutrient. But again, it's not, I mean, it's not useful to enter this debate because we have the more larger category of other substance.
Thank you. And it's a comment from one of the associations that they've been trying with their local member state to open up the discussion, and the probiotics file for them doesn't seem to be a priority, and they've been trying to get the probiotics file in the priority list for the EU Council. Right, we almost at the top of the hour. Apologies if we didn't get to answer your question. As Rosanna mentioned at the start, we can follow up with Q&As, a Q&A paper later, or perhaps organize an additional webinar. So thank you again very much, Katja and Espen, for your insights, and to all of you for taking the time out of your busy schedules to consider the probiotics topics. And for now, goodbye.